JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a show that, by all accounts, shouldn't work. An adaptation of a manga, which at that point had celebrated its 25th anniversary, was bound to fall flat, especially considering the much more niche nature of the anime industry back in 2013. Parts 1 and 2, parts covered in Season 1, were heavily inspired by mangas that were 80s through and through, most notably Fist of the North Star, an aesthetic that most newer anime fans weren't too fond of. However, in spite, or maybe because of that, the show became a smash hit. It was so memorable, in fact, that it gained a cult-like following, with some die-hard fans of the show being found in every corner of the internet to this day. Naturally, the show with that much success received several new seasons. The 5th season, or Part 6 as it's more commonly referred, being released in 2022. The part that has arguably seen the most critical acclaim out of all of them, though, was Part 4, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure: Diamond is Unbreakable. Each successive part of JoJo's has a very distinct atmosphere and vibe, and Diamond is Unbreakable was no different. Part 1 could be called a gothic horror type of story, Part 2 was shonen, straight and simple, and Part 3 was a quest-like action-adventure story. As you can see, the show is no stranger to shifting gears between each part, to the point where, without recurring characters to connect them, it could be considered different shows entirely. But the shift from Part 3 to 4 could be considered more severe than any of the previous, and its success no doubt gave the author the motivation to try more daring types of stories with each future part. Although every part has aspects that would warrant their own videos about it, Part 4 is in my opinion the most interesting part of the anime so far. After being set in Victorian England, 1930s America and Europe, and late 80s Egypt, the series' next setting would end up a little different. A small town in late 90s Japan. There are two types of shows that a setting like this would easily facilitate. Both are incorporated in Diamond is Unbreakable: slice of life and murder mystery. The plot kicks off when Jotaro Kujo tracks down the main character, Shosuke Higashikata, illegitimate child of Joseph Joestar, to find an object which can give people stands in the small town of Morayo. These so-called stands are the foundation on which every JoJo's part, starting with Part 3, is built upon. For those of you who aren't familiar with stands, let me explain. Stands are a manifestation of the soul of the user. Because these stands aren't bound to any power system at all, their powers can vary wildly between people, allowing for some of the most creative and unique fights in all of anime. The first half of the season is dedicated to finding and retrieving the aforementioned object, and defeating any stand users created in the process. While our protagonists deal with these issues, a far more dangerous being is casting a shadow over the town of Morayo, making the struggles our main cast has faced so far seem minuscule in comparison. While the setting and main cast make for a wonderful combination, it is the antagonist who really makes Diamond is Unbreakable the masterpiece that it is. Yoshikage Kira only makes his first on-screen appearance 17 episodes into the show, and it takes another 4 episodes for him to be an actual focal character for an episode. But although it takes over half the series runtime for him to become relevant, this does nothing to decrease his status as one of anime's all-time great villains. Yoshikage Kira is a simple man. Every day he goes to and from work. He is single, has no kids, and has never been married. He doesn't have any grand ambitions, going out of his way not to stand out at every opportunity possible. All he wants to do is live a quiet life. But behind the facade of an average, uninteresting office worker, someone who could only be called a sociopath. Someone who is seemingly governed by murderous impulses and a hyperfixation on hands. If he perceived the girl to have beautiful hands, she'd go missing. Her body would be nowhere to be found except for her hand, in the possession of a Yoshikage Kira, acting as if he was in a relationship with it, at least until the smell of rotting flesh would set in. His murder spree has gone on for 15 years, and it does make sense that he has never been caught. Kira is a very meticulous man, with his behavior almost certainly guaranteeing he has some sort of OCD. His routines are set in stone, and he doesn't tolerate imperfection by himself or anyone else. This is also the reason why he started living in seclusion to avoid interacting with others. Kira is also a deeply selfish man. He cares about fulfilling his own needs and wants above everything else, not caring how many people he hurts or kills in the process. But the long time he has gone without getting caught has made him a bit complacent, leading to his eventual demise. JoJo's soundtrack has always been amazing. The main character's themes, especially, stay in your mind for a long time after the show has finished. They just fill you with a sense of excitement every time they start playing, elevating every scene they're featured. Totaro's and Giorno's themes especially left such a big mark on viewers that they managed to make their way into mainstream pop culture. While Chosuke's theme is in that same category, I personally think the title of most memorable theme in Part 4 goes to Kira. Its eerie sound really helps sell the danger and suspense that comes with his character and contrasts the more upbeat vibe of the show in general. In fact, that musical difference pretty closely resembles the contrast between Kira and the rest of the show overall. However, to talk about the difference, we first have to take a bit of time to talk about the town the show is set in, Morio. Despite us seeing incident after incident occur, the town feels rather peaceful. This is probably accentuated by how the small-time enemies are treated. Apart from the man who started the whole Arrow fiasco, Okayasu's brother, none of them were actually killed. Even when these people would attempt to hurt or kill our main cast, their crimes would, more often than not, be easily forgiven. Okayasu, who tried to kill both Chosuke and Koichi, later became best friends with both of them. Rohan, who tried to take the memory of Koichi and Okuyasu and turn them into material for his manga, later turned into an integral member of the crew. Kaku, who stalked and kidnapped Koichi with the intention of controlling his life, later became his girlfriend. But even the enemies who didn't become part of the crew would have some small appearances later down the line, having to spend a few weeks or months in the hospital at worst. This, combined with the episodes which didn't really further the plot, instead focusing on the interactions between characters, really made Morio feel like an actual town with living, breathing human beings. And this rather laid-back and friendly atmosphere is what makes Kira stick out. The show lures us into a false sense of security and consequently rips it out from right under our feet. Growing accustomed to these punishments, which feel like mere slaps on the wrist compared to the crimes committed, makes Kira's propensity to murder feel even more cruel. But Kira doesn't only stand out in comparison to the town of Morio, it's also quite different from the other characters. JoJo's lavishes itself on its unique and colorful characters with their iconic poses, iconic dialogues, and even more iconic action scenes. The show truly lives up to its title of bizarre in all aspects, be it the characters, the color scheme, or the power system. This is why, ironically, in his quest to stay hidden and fly under the radar, Kira sticks out like a sore thumb. Most other characters are showy and loud, both the way they dress and the way they act. When someone comes around and acts and looks the total opposite, although, to be fair, Kira's outfit would still be a bit extravagant by real life standards, the viewers notice. It's a small but distinct discomfort created just by the sheer clash of vibes between him and the rest of the cast this season. And Kira does not only stick out in Morio, but also when compared to all the other great JoJo villains. Each and every one of them is visually unique, and they all have some sort of greater goal in mind. Paris wanted to conquer his one weakness, the sun, to become the ultimate being. Dio wanted to take over the world and create a new world order in his own image. Diavolo longed to possess ultimate power while ruling from the shadows. Pucci wanted to fulfill Dio's other goal of attaining heaven, making every human being acknowledge and submit to their own fate. But Kira doesn't have anything like that. Throughout the show, he only has one goal in mind, which pales in scale when compared to the other villains of JoJo's. He just wants to live in peace and quiet while still being able to satisfy his urge to murder. Kira is also a very passive character, partly due to the nature of his goal, also partly because of his personality. He doesn't actively attack our protagonists, completely ignoring them until there's no other choice but direct confrontation. After the first big confrontation, Kira has to assume a different personality to avoid being caught. He does nothing to actually deal with those who are close to exposing his real identity. In fact, it was up to Kira's father to create more stand users as a way to distract, than in best case defeat Josuke and his friends. Even his abilities are a bit subdued, at least in comparison to his main antagonist counterparts. Whereas characters like Dio, Pucci, and Diavolo have 9 invincible powers that grant him control over an aspect of time itself, Kira simply has bombs. Killer Queen and Sheer Heart Attack are both abilities that allow him to remotely blow up things, with the former allowing him to plant a bomb via touch, the latter functioning as a heat-seeking explosive device that cannot be stopped. But in reality, this is all he needs. For most of his life, this power was enough, as it allowed him to continue living his life by helping him get rid of all evidence pertaining to his crimes. While he does attain a new power, Bites the Dust, during the later part of the show, a power that allows him to influence time itself on some level, it is very different in nature to the others. While all the other villains with powers like this have full autonomy over what they can and can't do with them, Bites the Dust is more of an automatic safety feature that once activated plants itself in the host, blowing up anyone who tries to pry into Kira's true personality before rewinding time back by an hour. However, any occurrences that happen aren't truly erased, as they were fated to happen, meaning that any people that died in one of the previous loops will still die regardless of the circumstances surrounding their death not happening again. Truthfully, after obtaining Bites the Dust, Kira should have easily been able to beat Josuke and the others, as there was no way for them to overcome this power. Kira thought so too, but that was exactly what led to his downfall. He was very meticulous in some ways, easily grew overconfident if he believed there was no way for him to lose anymore. He spent practically no time on exploring his own stance combat capabilities, as he was of the belief that he didn't need it. When he is bestowed with his new ability, he grows cocky and arrogant. He believes he has already won, simply toying with Hayato, who had driven him into a corner in the first place. But in his overconfidence, Kira makes one crucial mistake. He reveals his own identity. While that loop ends in failure for Hayato, who was trying to pass on the information to the group, Hayato wouldn't let that stop him, knowing that he would very likely do the same next loop, as Kira himself was still affected by the fate of his ability, and because he didn't carry over memories from the last loop, Hayato concocted a plan. He would call Josuke and tell him to go to the place where Kira would soon reveal his own identity. The crew fights Kira, and he barely comes out of the fight alive. Trying to escape, he crawls into the streets, where he would be met by paramedics. But before he could get any sort of treatment, he's run over by an ambulance. And as if that wasn't enough, Kira would have the honor of dying twice in a single episode. After his physical death, his soul is transported into the Ghost Alley, where Raimi and her dog Arnold trick him into looking back, causing him to have to face the wicked spirits for all eternity. And honestly, while it was a bit odd for a character to have two deaths, thematically, both of them made total sense. When the ambulance ran over him, it tore off his face, just like he did with the man whose identity he had stolen. Additionally, it technically gave him what he always wished for: anonymity, as his body could not be identified. However, a man as evil and despicable as Kira could not possibly get off this easily. And who better to punish him than his first victim, Raimi? She had been spending the past 15 years in the Ghost Alley, to bear witness as soul after soul killed by her own killer would pass through the alley, powerless to do anything about it. So it is fitting that she was the one who initially tipped off the group as to the existence of Kira, but that wouldn't be enough to finally let her spirit rest in peace and ascend to heaven. As her final act, she would doom Kira to an eternity of torment by the wicked spirits, ever denying him the peace and quiet he had always desired. But while it made sense, character-wise, for Kira to end the way that he did, the fact that he didn't die at the hands of one of the main characters seems to have left a few people a bit unsatisfied. The climactic battle was very intense, however one could consider it a bit of an odd ending. Something like this hasn't happened in JoJo's before. But I think there's one very important thing to consider that will shine a whole new light on the ending. But Chosuke and his group of friends were the major acting forces in Kira's defeat. Simplifying the conflict to them versus Kira would be a bit reductive. In fact, I'd argue that the real central conflict was between Kira and the town of Marayu. Kira had been a pest upon the city for 15 years, claiming dozens upon dozens of innocent lives, all while pretending to be an upstanding member of society. So who better to get rid of him than the entire city working together? This is also shown in the final episode of the show, where all the characters, the main or side character, come together to see off Raimi and thank her for freeing the town of the curse. While others might prefer other parts of JoJo's for their grander narratives or bigger stakes, Diamond is Unbreakable has a special place in my heart. There's just a certain vibe that it manages to achieve that no other show has really managed to replicate. While I am looking forward to the adaptation of future parts, I can confidently say that part 4 is one that I will keep coming back to.